I bet you weren't expecting the first few clips of this vlog to be a literal beach volleyball court in the middle of New York City, and if I'm being honest, I didn't expect it either, but my brother is a huge volleyball fan and I'm staying with him, so I had no choice but to tag along. I also wasn't allowed to play, but I did get a frozen blueberry lemonade. And I mean, the sights of Riverside Park are just glorious. I just woke up and I'm in New York, and suddenly my life doesn't really feel real anymore, honestly. I proceeded to then record myself drinking a black coffee like a daily vlogger, and then tried to make myself be useful and take myself to the grocery store, which I then proceeded to record myself in like a daily vlogger. I was at a really odd time of my life when I recorded this video. Granted, it was only a few months ago, but I'm at a completely different stage of well-being currently, so I'm allowed to reflect on the past as I am doing now. I had just finished writing my university exams and I was waiting for my results to come out. I had no job lined up for the future and everything was all wishy-washy and up in the air, and I decided to escape to New York City and live with my older brother for a little bit. So I was trying to make myself useful. I have a few friends that I've made throughout the years that are scattered throughout New York, and we all have very similar interests of going art gallery hopping or sitting in parks or going window shopping in cute, quirky thrift stores on the East Village, in the East Village. So I spent a lot of my days doing that. It was a distraction. I was connecting to people that I wish I could connect to more in a city that I feel oddly connected to. I feel like there's a very common theme in these vlogs where I go into vintage shops and look around there for like 2 hours and never actually buy anything. I mean, don't get me wrong, my bank account absolutely loves that, but that just means I spend all my money on matcha lattes and bagels. And honestly, I don't do drugs or consume alcohol, so I think that's completely valid. When I look back on this trip to New York, everything was perfect and I wouldn't change a single bit of it, but I did not have a good night's sleep once, and I don't think that was down to the city and it being noisy because I've lived on top of a nightclub before. I think I was just so pumped with adrenaline that my brain just didn't let me doze off. And you know what? I took this as a blessing in disguise, because if I'm gonna be up at 6 a.m. in New York, then I'm gonna be productive about it, and I'm going to strap on my New Balance Fresh Foams and I'm going to take myself on a run in Central Park and picture myself as Nate Archibald from Gossip Girl, of course, training to be a D1 athlete, because that's just what you gotta do. And this is a short-term reality that I just thought would never occur in this lifetime, and I felt like a New York local, guys. The park was just so quiet and lush, and oh wow, how is this in the middle of a wham city? I feel like I've spoken about this before, but if you haven't watched any of my other vlogs, then you are slacking. But basically, whenever I travel somewhere, I detest taking public transport. Not because of the fact that public transport's yucky and whatever, no. I love it. I love that it's there, it's available. I'm gonna use it as opposed to like an Uber or a taxi. But I love walking places because I have a fear that I'm missing out on things and I'm passing way too much on the subway, for example. You just come across so much in New York. I was actually on the way to Bagel Pub to pick up a bagel because I was having a bagel a day. Don't even. And I came across this karate expose by some super talented young people, and I was just in awe, and I took in the show because that's what you do when you're in New York. You just take in what the city has to offer. I also just quickly want to take a second to reflect on how comfortable I now am on enjoying my own company in public spaces and solo dining, because that's something that 2020 Angie would have felt really uncomfortable in, and now I don't even think twice about it, if I'm being honest. I think that when I think of cities like New York and Paris and London and Milan, I think of big crowds but really isolated humans within those crowds, and I was really trying to suss out the vibe and the community aspect of New York, and I found that there was so much actually available for New Yorkers to meet other people like-minded and with opposing opinions, like book clubs in Bryant Park. Don't get me wrong, I understand some of the downsides that come with living in a big city, the isolation of not finding yourself in the right circles or in the right space with the right mindset, but from what I observed over these few days that I was there was sense of communities, even in areas of Manhattan where you just wouldn't assume there would be. I saw sparks. I went to this gorgeous church and I said a prayer for my parents and for all the people I missed, because solo traveling is fun and meeting up with my brother was fun, but I felt felt really isolated because I felt like I wanted to form a community in New York, but this was just a short-term trip and there was no point for forming long-term connections in a place that I probably wouldn't come back to in the near future at all. I mean, like I mentioned in the first part of this video, I have no ties to anything. My family live halfway across the world in Malawi. I am a single girl that went to uni in Nottingham and have no ties to that, and I'm just about to graduate and I'm being told that the world is my oyster, but it's not, because at the end of the day I have a Sri Lankan passport and I can't just move to New York in a heartbeat. Regardless of how good of a human I am or how good of a job I get, I still need a visa, and that's that. I'm learning how to deal with these emotions, how to get a taste of the pie but know that I can't have a full slice. I came to the realization that I just need to absolutely juice this trip and make sure I get every last drop of New York that I possibly can, and that meant getting a free class pass trial and going to a load of Barry's Bootcamp classes, which were great, by the way. Free Theraguns after the class. We love to see it. I also booked all these classes at different Barry sites, so it meant that I could explore areas like Dumbo and also get a workout while I'm doing that. Okay, so we're 6 minutes into the vlog, so you know a lot about me thus far. So you know I like sitting in parks and looking at fountains, and here I am doing that all over again. In 2017, I visited Austin, Texas, because my cousins live there, and we took a university tour of the University of Texas. And I remember the tour guide telling us specifically that they have all these weird and wonderful societies at the university, and they have one called the People Watching Society, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is the most bizarre thing I have ever heard. Why on earth would people watch other people? And here I am, almost 10 years later, watching other people, and my goodness, is it fascinating. People watching is just one of the best things to do, and I think that comes from my psychoanalytic point of view and wanting to go into mental health, but it's just I could do it for hours and hours and hours and just not get bored whatsoever. I love a musical. I'm a theatre queen, and my brother decided to surprise me with tickets to see a musical. Love that. He, of course, booked The Book of Mormon. I really enjoyed it. It was very controversial. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Another influence that my brother had on me was books and reading. I never really understood books or why someone would inflict that kind of activity on them that wasn't like prescribed by a lecturer. But here I am reading a book, and I've started to swap books out. So I'm going a novel, and then I'll read like a self-help book, and then I'll read an autobiography, and then I'll read like a really hyperfactual book to like better myself in my career. Carrying a book in general and having something to sit down and give myself a rest and let my legs breathe a little is something that genuinely saved me throughout this trip. Anyways, I heart New York.